Cool. Okay. Hi. We obviously know each other, but this is the first time that we're doing a podcast together. So I'm Sid, and do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Vaishnavi.
Cool. We actually met recently when I was on holiday, and we decided then that we're gonna do a podcast where obviously I know that you're interested in history and art, things that I don't know too much about, but things that I'm interested in learning about. And I have a little bit of interest in history from the geopolitics side of things, or just from interesting stories, sort of thing. So we thought we'd try something where we each bring a story and we talk to each other and we can share it with other people as well. So that's the idea behind this podcast, where it's very low production value, as you can see. But we literally gonna share stories, so that's the whole idea. Do you have you done podcasts before?
No, this is my first time actually. But I was very interested in doing it. I always wanted to do something along the lines of a podcast to talk about more history and art stuff, and just maybe music or something that I'm interested in. And I'm glad I get to do this with you because I feel like it's a good concept where we share our stories, and I know that you love things in science, which I probably don't understand a lot, but I try my best to understand it. So yeah, it's nice to yeah, I like learning about new things as well. So yeah, we'll see how
Yeah,
it goes.
I remember when we met. I was talking to you about quantum physics and like how the whole uh, uh, light interferometry and atom interferometry, and you were actually interested. Like you were able to follow the whole conversation, which has not been my
No,
experience with a
I
lot of
think
people.
you're being kind. I was not able to follow the whole conversation, but I do know. I do know because I think my visit to CERN helped a little
I
bit
think
with
so. I
that.
think that would, yeah. I think you go to CERN, it kind of just osmosis. It gets in you.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, this week my story is actually not science based at all. Yeah, so it's a bit of a googly this time. For the first time itself, which kind of goes against the idea of a googly. But yes,
Thank you for throwing my intro out of the window. I'm glad.
you're welcome. Cool. So do you want to go first? Seeing as you are the more prepared of the two of us.
No, I think you're setting high expectations. I just brushed up one stuff a little bit.
It's my attempt to set low expectations for myself, but it's okay.
I'm good.
No pressure. Just this is the first go, so we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so I did not mess up your intro because I do have one from history.
Nice.
Um, no, no kidding. So the thing is, I went to Stockholm to visit my best friend last Easter break, and there was a museum that we went to called the Vasa Museum. And I thought it's a very
Ooh.
interesting tidbit of history that not a lot of people know, but it's
I actually know about this. Good.
oh,
No,
okay.
no spoilers. No spoilers. I'm sure I don't know enough, but we actually did a case study on this in one of my courses, so I know a little bit of history of Vasa. That was the big. I,
Okay, then you probably know more than me. If you've done a case
no,
study
no,
on
but
this.
I'm sure people listening to this don't know about the Vasa story. So go for it. Awesome. I'll try to ask good questions.
Oh, don't ask. Please don't ask questions. I know it.
Okay, cool. Vasa. So what is?
Okay, no, okay, let's go. Yeah, so there's a Vasa museum in Stockholm, and it's basically an entire ship, and I do believe that it's the only one in the world where they have an entire reconstructed 17th century ship, which was just amazing to see. Like when you walk through the museum, you just see this gigantic ship, like just sitting there, and it was beautiful. Like we were mesmerized. We were like, "Oh my god, this is so great!"
Yeah,
But
because
yeah,
I've seen pictures. That it's literally like a ship inside the museum, right? Like whole
yes,
ship
yes,
inside the museum.
absolutely. Like, and I think the thing that you don't realize unless and until you see it is because, of course, it has a huge deck and everything, but the what are they called, the thing holding up the hulls and everything, and they are so tall, like the pillar on the ship, like that is so tall, like you don't understand how big it is
Okay.
until you see it with the in its entirety with the hulls and everything,
Mm.
because on top it's just a lot bigger,
Mm.
in rather than the deck. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was pretty interesting to see, and I do believe that that is the only place that you can see a full like 17th century ship. And I think that they have restored, like most of it was original, like around 90% of it was original. So that was insane. Yeah. So the story behind it is that in it was in around 1625, and they had commissioned about four ships, and they'd given this sort of shipbuilding activity to this Dutch designer. And this was mainly the monarch in Sweden called Gustav Adolf, and he's called the Lion in the North, so it kind
Woo.
of reminded me of King of the North from
Yeah.
Game of Thrones. Yeah.
The line is north.
Lion in the North, the sinking ship. you know. Anyway,
In Game of
so
Thrones, the
yeah.
lions never they didn't do very well. So maybe
Oh, no one did
no
well
one.
except the
No.
person in the
Yeah.
wheelchair. But anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, so this guy, so this monarch kind of commissioned these four ships, and they wanted Sweden to be like the northern kingdom of Europe.
Mm.
And at that time, they had a lot of spoils of war and everything coming their way.
Yeah.
So they were just like, yeah, let's go, let's show our mighty strength and this and that. So they commissioned these four ships, and Vasa was supposed to be the biggest of them. And so what actually happened was just everything after that was down the drain. So the designer basically fell ill and died.
Oh no.
I mean, and then the guy, yeah, and so they had to bring somebody like his assistant type person, like the intern, basically, to carry out everything else. And it was not a great design because they wanted to show, like I said, it's very tall. In height it's very tall,
Hmm.
vertically, but it's not enough in length, and
Ah.
that was the problem.
Right.
Like you have to, they didn't know at that time that if you want to make it like super tall, you also need to make it
Yeah.
like super wide as
Yeah.
well. And then they sort of didn't know it at that time. And everybody was too afraid to tell the king this because he would have just been like, it wouldn't have been commissioned at the time that he wanted it to be commissioned
Hmm.
in. And so everyone was like, oh my God. And the designer just sort of clocked out of life, basically.
But this is so crazy. Like we talk about this a lot at work, where we're like, you have to document enough that anyone else picks up the project is supposed to be able to like start from where you left instead of having to start from scratch. And here in medieval times, when getting ill and dying is very much a thing that is normal. This
Backup plan. If the deadline doesn't work, I can take poison and die.
yeah, that's always the backup plan. I mean, in this kind of scenario, you would think that every designer would have like a whole team that knows everything inside out, but apparently not. They were so holding secrets of design and whatever that.
Yeah, because I think anybody at that time, anybody could just be a spy and send it to the enemy
Yeah,
camp,
yeah,
right? Basically, so it was just, I don't know, they had a weird system going on.
yeah.
So what happens is finally this ship is built, and it's actually very beautiful. Like the artwork and everything on it is extremely beautiful. They have all this Greek mythology stuff going on, the Norse mythology stuff going on. Like there's a amalgamation of all these sort of heroes and everything. And also apparently like quite a few like the enemies and stuff. Now I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Norway or something,
Mm.
which was the enemy. but they had their sort of uniforms like army uniforms, and then they had very degrading statues of
Ouch.
them. So basically, their version of "तुम हमारी जूती के नीचे रहेगा" so that
Ouch. And they put that on the ship, like as a
it's on the ship. It's on the ship. They show it to you. So it's quite funny.
incredible, awesome. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah. So that was funny to watch. They had like these degrading things of the enemies in there as well. And oh, we are the mighty people,
Yeah.
whatever. With the Roman emperors, and oh yeah, there were Roman emperors as well, a lot of them. So yeah, it's quite beautifully designed, everything. But it's really funny to me that they spend so much money on this ornamentation, everything,
Yeah.
and what they didn't get right was just making it longer. Like,
Engineering always gets everyone.
yeah. So that's what happened, and so it set sail on yeah, I don't know. Basically, I don't think it won the year, but it set sail when it was finished, and it just went offshore for like 20 minutes and basically started sinking. Because it was just too heavy. It had like so much of this ornamentation, people, the
Yeah.
guns, the cannons, everything, and the water just started coming out of the cannons. And I think it was quite like how they show in Titanic, where the water just
Yeah.
gets in below deck first and everything. So
Okay,
that's what basically happened.
I remember reading about this part because it was like such a big thing that it's the biggest ship and we're launching it. There were like whole crowds of people assembled on the quay, and this big ship is leaving, and because they wanted to show off like all the cannons that they could fit on the ship, they had all the cannon holes, the port.
All the guns, everything,
Yeah,
everything, like
and they were like
yeah.
completely like showing off basically their big new ship, and because of which it just started taking on water.
Was too heavy and the deck was not enough. Like it had to be longer, it had to be more spaced out, there had to be less stuff in it.
Yeah.
And the keel thing had to be a lot stronger, which it
Mm.
wasn't. And yeah, basically it sank in 20 minutes. And yeah, sadly, lots of lives went, but not as much because they were still close to shore. So I think that's good that
Mm.
if it were like more out to sea, that it would have been a worse tragedy. But thankfully, maybe some people were able to sort of get out and everything.
Yeah.
But still, lives were lost and then it kind of sank to the bottom of the sea. And later on, like people knew, of course, that the ship had sunk, and they knew how much of artillery and everything was in there. So there was a whole looting episode
Oh
with the guns
no.
and people
Oh
dying.
no. Like all the people who had assembled to see the ship go, they were like, "Ooh, I know."
And like, हाँ पैसे कमाएंगे
There is literally gold right there, and I can go down and get it. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so that's what happened, and then there were a lot of divers, and so at that time they didn't have a lot of technology, but they somehow managed. I don't remember the specifics, but then there were a lot of sort of pirates and these local sort of thieves who managed to go down and get the guns and sell them
Yeah.
off at the black market and everything. So that happened, so people earned some money out of it. And
Yeah, in
then
the I can totally see that being a thing of democracy. Like you sink a ship and people dive and get stuff out and sell it, so the wealth automatically goes amongst the people. It's
rule of the people.
it's an anti 1% movement.
And it was kind of a good because the people, the council who commissioned this on behalf of the king, they were quite scared because they didn't know who to blame it on. So we have a dead guy, let's blame it on the dead guy.
Of
So basically, they blamed it on the dead designer. And I don't know, like it doesn't say here, but then I do think that the other guy who was with the designer, who was sort of the builder and engineer kind of person,
Mm.
so he sort of probably committed suicide. I remember hearing that, but I'm not too sure of that. But yeah, he was again like, we couldn't meet the deadline,
Yeah.
die. That's it.
Uh,
Um,
I remember this
so
story
yeah.
from when I was reading about this for my case study. The the night before the ship was supposed to set sail, the person who was in charge of, I think, the building, the ship builder, the main one, not the dead one, the alive one.
The engineer. Yeah, yeah.
He called this big general or senator or whatever in to show him how unstable the ship was.
Yeah, yeah.
And when the person wasn't convinced, all he had to do was like hire 40 men, tell them to run like side to side on the ship, and it started rocking so badly that the guy was like, "No, no, stop! I get it. I understand. We'll deal with this." I don't think they actually did anything about it, but
No,
yeah,
because they set sail the next day.
yeah.
Like they were like, yes, I can see that, but
Dead.
I have a job and the kid.
Oh man.
So yeah, and they did have the dead designer to blame it on, so
Yeah.
that's what basically happened. And so the senators and everybody got out of it.
How we actually learned about it from a systems engineering point of view, where what happened was initially they
Oh,
were
I,
building like a big ship, and the designer was like, "Yeah, I'm totally going to build a big ship." And then the king, who is, by the way, not even around, like he's off fighting a war. He has not
yeah.
even seen the designer who's actually building it. He's just commissioned it and said that you'll get paid and go do this. Uh, he writes a letter saying that I want you to add an extra deck of guns on the ship.
Yes,
And the
yes.
designer is like, I can't do that. The ship was not designed to do that. What do you mean add an extra deck of guns? Like, what is it? So he's literally asked to make it from like a double decker to a triple decker ship in the middle of the building process, design process. And the designer, I think, at that point chose the getting ill and dying route. He's like, this is not ending well. I just,
This is stress, too much stress. Like, yeah, yeah, you are absolutely right, and thank you for putting the specific out because I forgot. But yes, that is where it got heavy.
uh,
They did end up making it, and you can see it. Like you can see that they made it like it was supposed to be like it's small. I mean, it's not small, but then it's like it's like a two kind of
yeah.
like below deck and then the upper deck, and then they just install this thing in between with like cannon. The cannon thing is so like you can see the amount of like the cannon holes in it are like a lot.
Ooh.
Like you could just walk through the ship and there are like so many cannon holes in there, and I'm like, but that's why the water got in so fast.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. And normally cannon holes are like always situated above where the water can get to, but because this ship is so unstable, that
Yeah.
point is can be anywhere. So it's like, what can you really do as a designer other than getting ill and dying? So I feel bad for
Yeah,
the person. I feel for you, man. But anyway, nice
yeah.
story.
So
That, yeah, keep going.
I have an end to
Okay,
it.
nice. Yes.
So jump to 1950, where apparently because of Sweden's waters that the way they are, and they're very icy and they don't have one particular chemical or something. The ship actually got preserved quite a bit.
Huh?
And of course, it was like had to be sprayed with some chemical to be like to preserve it again and sort of do that. But they were able to pull it out of the water using modern techniques. And they did that, and then they got a bidder to sort of build this museum. And it's fun, like there's a movie in the museum, and then you can sort of see them jump to this new modern era where they're trying to assemble, and they say that this is like building the biggest jigsaw puzzle in the world. And it sounds so fascinating that they got to do that and see which piece fits where.
Yeah.
And it was insane that they got all of these things together. Like a lot of it is rebuilt in the original way,
Wow.
and it is insane that they were able to do that without any kind of like reference or anything whatsoever. And then
Yeah.
they figured that out, the degrading stuff and the Roman emperors are easy, but like the other stuff is not that easy to figure out. There's some random angel somewhere and some random guy playing the trumpet somewhere, and then you have no idea where to fit those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was insane. I believe it took like 20-30 years to sort of rebuild it properly and sort of maintain it, and make sure that the moisture is not getting to it. But yeah, it is something to see because they do say that it might just collapse after some years.
Yeah,
So yeah, you see it when you get to see it, kind of thing.
I have
So
to. I have to go see this. Like, I want to go to Stockholm. It's been
oh, absolutely,
years.
it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
And imagine when they're trying to like rebuild it, right? They had to do it the old way. So instead of like just being able to use things like super glue to just put stuff together, they have to go find beeswax and make it and then apply it and then wait for 2 days for it to cure or something. Oh
Exactly.
my
Yeah,
god! Like
yeah.
imagine having it's like having a phone on you, but you have to send letters by pigeon just so because it has to be
Just because.
historically accurate. Oh, that is bad.
I do remember, I do remember when I went to London, and they rebuilt the Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. So they tried to do it right from like how it was done in his time, and it's quite legit. Like they used the straws and the specific wood and everything, and they rebuilt it like how it would have been at that time. And yeah, I mean, it's insane the dedication they have to do this. But yeah, it's literally not using modern techniques, but like the ones in the 17th, 16th century.
Yeah,
And so yeah, that's insane. Like it makes your job hard, but when you see it, it looks very original. Like
I can imagine. Yeah, it will look like nothing everyone else has ever been. So yeah,
yeah, yeah,
that must be awesome.
beautiful. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I every time I hear the word Vasa, I find out something new. It's like every time it has come into my life, it's like, oh wow, so this also happened. Crazy.
Yeah, but I don't know what it was. Like we weren't expecting so much when we went in, but when you just see, I don't know why it turned out to be like our most favorite thing that we saw in Stockholm. Like we went to a lot of museums, we did like a lot of sightseeing, but that turned out to be like our favorite thing. It was like a
Hmm.
good old Vasa.
Yeah.
It was really a good experience to watch such a gigantic ship and the intricate kind of details, and I feel bad that the art was kind of lost, and I'm glad that it wasn't, because it's the statues and everything are really beautiful on it, and they were able to paint it quite well.
Yeah.
So you do see it how it was supposed to look like original, and lots of colors of red and purple and gold, royalty with
Nice.
majesty, this and that, so it looks amazing.
Clearly, and I'm sure it being such like a flagship, like in the literal sense of the word, like a flagship.
Yeah, yeah. Flagship.
If being a flagship, they would have put like all sorts of effort into making it look beautiful, and it would have all the symbols of royalty. Like it would literally be the ship carrying the flag when they go to war. So I'm sure it's meant to look very royal and regal and beautiful. If only it would have stayed afloat. But yeah.
We would have had a lot of guns if it didn't.
Yeah, that's sad. Anyway, cool story. Okay, uh, so jumping straight in, then maybe I guess now it's my turn.
Go for it.
Okay, low expectations. That's the name of the game.
It's fine, it's fine. You knew about Vasa, so I thought I'm going to tell you something you didn't know, but
Sorry, हमें सब पता है. Okay, cool. So my story is actually about it, it's from 1971. So have you? I'm sure you know about the war of, depending on which perspective you look at it from, uh, the war of liberation of Bangladesh or the war of the splitting of Pakistan. If you look at it from that point of view, but the 1971 war in Bangladesh. That's what I'm talking about. So this is actually a story from that uh, era. It's a very small part of the larger conflict that there's been. Conflict itself is too big to cover in like 10 minutes. You can't tell a story about the entire thing.
yeah, no,
So many.
and it's very complicated as well. Like
Abs-
lots of geopolitical implications now. So,
Yes, yes. But I actually started thinking about this story recently because of the recent events about.
Sheikh
Uh,
Hasina, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I can kind of see how certain things have very large implications when other superpowers get involved in like a smaller conflict. And we at that point as well, like the world wars had already happened, so people knew that these things do happen where smaller conflicts quickly escalate, and then a lot of people are involved, and it can become such a big conflict suddenly. So it was in that background. But the story actually is about the role of Russia and the US in this larger conflict. So, uh, to give people some context, the war was really just between India and Pakistan. Pakistan at that time was West Pakistan and East Pakistan. East Pakistan being what is currently Bangladesh, and that had happened since India's independence in 1947 and Pakistan's independence as well. Uh, but when the elections happened around that time, skipping over a large part of the story, but when the elections happened, East Pakistan actually got a majority, but the government in West Pakistan decided to illegitimize the majority that they got and basically call the elections. They did something, and that's what led to the bigger tensions. And they had been brewing for a while. There was also a big cyclone that happened, and aid was withheld, and that inflamed more of East Pakistan as well. And and then because of the increased movements around that time, West Pakistan basically tried to oppress and suppress these movements very harshly. And that led to a huge exodus of refugees coming into India, which meant India got involved. And it being on India's borders, India was always going to get involved. Like they were watching the situation very closely. Uh, it was very obvious at that point that India was going to intervene to help the, I don't know what the Bangladesh liberation forces.
People Liberation Army, is it?
I think it was something liberation, but anyway, they were going to join the war on their side to defeat the Pakistani military forces who were in East Pakistan at that time, and in the same context, Pakistan had always had good relations with the US. So a larger global context at that time was the Cold War. We had just gotten out of the World Wars. Uh, the Cold War was suddenly brewing. Uh, if you've looked at the map of like India and Asia in general and the subcontinent, you will see that China is also a big player. Russia is a big player. China was fairly weak at that time because they had hugely suffered from the world wars and the Japanese invasion. So they were not as big a player as they are today. But Russia was a very big player. Russia was the main, one of the two superpowers who actually were on the two sides of the Cold War.
Nuclear enemy for the US, the
Absolutely.
only legit nuclear enemy. Yeah.
Yeah, and nuclear weapons
Yeah.
were very clearly known to be war starters and enders in one go. And nobody wanted to see a nuclear conflict happen again. So it was these two superpowers, when they get involved, people did used to get nervous. And it was very obvious even then. The H bombs had already been tested. Obviously, the general public didn't know this at that time, but that was very much on the minds of the leaders that it could escalate into a world-ending conflict. And in that context, India had always sided, like they had signed a pact of peace and cooperation with Russia. India considered Russia an ally. That's where India got all of its military infrastructure uh, to upgrade whatever they had inherited from British India when they got independence, and uh, they always wanted to. They always counted on Russia to intervene on their side, and Russia did at that point. They
Yeah, so I'll just give a little bit of a thing
go for it.
in this. It's so basically we were a new country at that time, right? And India was signing pacts with like everyone. We had this foreign policy of non-alignment, so we weren't exactly an ally, but we wanted. So see, China is our neighbor, Russia is our sort of neighbor, kind of. These are the countries that we are like close, as in close to in terms of geographical sense. and so it was very important for us to establish like good friendly relations. And we, at that point in time, we had this whole thing of like, oh, we're the non-violent country, you know, we won our independence through non-violence,
Yeah.
and so we are non-aligned and we don't care about war and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So we were basically being friendly and everything with everyone. So yeah, we did reach out to the US for help first in this conflict, but they were, like you said, siding more with Pakistan, and we didn't have a choice kind of after that. And also, like the way that West Pakistan and East Pakistan are placed, it was the British intent, I would believe now, I think it makes sense, that to sort of always have India in a conflict from both sides,
Mm.
because it's like at the west and east of India,
Mm.
and so have India in the middle, and they can, whatever happens, like you use these, activate these two sort of things, states and countries, to basically just kind of mm, create pressure
Yeah.
for India
Because
and not let them grow
a
as
war on two fronts is so much harder to fight, right? Just logistically. Uh, Not only do the opposition, especially
and
both
us being
sides are
like
controlled by.
non-violent and not having a strong army at that point in
Yeah,
time.
exactly. It just becomes such a harder scenario, which Pakistan did end up doing at that point. Like the first thing they did was open the second front on the West Pakistan side as soon as they realized that India was getting ready to intervene in East Pakistan. So that was always part of their plan, and I think it's like you said, the British did intend to have like that check and balance on Indian power because India was the bigger country, so with the more resources. But in this conflict, in this little conflict, you can see that uh, the initially East Pakistan did have some air support and they had a bit of naval support as well. But very quickly, as soon as the conflict started, India got supremacy over the naval side and very much the air side as well. So East Pakistan really just became almost like it was under siege. They had no land connection with West Pakistan. China was, although they did send troops to their borders, they weren't really helping East Pakistan directly, and even then, they would have to cross Indian territory at some point. So that was also not a very optimistic route to get supplies from. So East Pakistan really got into like a siege position, and India pushed on from that point. And in this context, the US was pushing for a ceasefire. Now, coming to their side of the story, they at this point were at the fag end of the Vietnam War. They had a bunch of naval resources, military resources in and around Vietnam, and they because that war was kind of ending, they had, I guess, more scope to think about something else. The Pentagon Papers had just happened. The entire country knew about uh, what really was the US strategy and how it wasn't working in Vietnam. So they were also in a face saving sort of scenario at that point. Uh, and in this context, they tried to pass a couple of resolutions in the UN. So at that point, UN was fairly strong. If a resolution had passed, India would have to adopt the ceasefire resolution. It was kind of part of the charter at that point, and India wasn't a big enough power. It's definitely not part of the Security Council, so it can veto. But which is why India leant very heavily on their alliance with the USSR, and the USSR was able to veto these two resolutions in the Security Council on India's behalf, uh, which meant that India was able to continue with uh, the military offensive, or it depends on the perspective you look at it from, but continue the liberation of Bangladesh. So uh, at that point, the US then decides that to put pressure on India, the official reason was they said that when this happens, they will go in and evacuate the East Pakistani officials and take it back to West Pakistan. That was the official reason, but there were just around 200 East Pakistani officials really in East Pakistan. So you don't need 14 ships to evacuate 200 people. That's especially nuclear powered submarine. I don't think you need
Yeah,
that to
big, big,
evacuate.
biggest submarine in the world.
I don't think you need those to evacuate people. But anyway, that's the thing. They ordered Task Force 14, based in the Vietnam waters, and they ordered it to start moving towards the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean in general. Uh, and this obviously we found out later through declassified tapes that have come out with Henry Kissinger and being very mad at the Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at that time. Um, and it got me thinking about the context, because at that time, if they had been able to unilaterally come in, the British also had sent their ships. So if these two had been able to get there, India would have been outgunned, and they would have had to seize operations just to become more defensive. Uh, but USSR, to nullify this intervention by superpowers, they sent their own submarines. Now, they had a bunch of ships in there, not just one nuclear powered submarine, but it was there in the Indian Ocean area. Nobody at that point knew exactly where it was either, and that was kind of the point as well. Uh, the idea suddenly became that now there is a Soviet ship, there are American ships, there are British ships coming in. If there is any sort of confrontation, if the Soviet ship gets destroyed, they already have nuclear weapons on board. It suddenly escalates the thing to, if you get involved, this is suddenly a very big thing.
Yeah.
And you can see that happening today as well. Like you can see that happening in Ukraine and Gaza. As soon as there are big superpowers that start getting involved, it happened in Syria as well. When Russia started backing Bashar al-Assad and the US was on the other side, the boundaries are very indistinct at this point. But now that that conflict has kind of gone down and it's reached some sort of conclusion, we can talk about this. Where at one point it looked like Russia and the US were on opposite sides, and if something had happened where, and even today in Ukraine, if the US does put troops on the ground, there will be US fighters fighting against Russia, and that suddenly, if you see dead bodies coming back into the shores, that becomes such a huge thing, and it could very well end up in World War III. So it has to be managed so hardly, so precariously. Uh, but going back to 1970s, like here we have India, which is a small country, Pakistan, which is also a small country on the world stage. Uh, the US actually, as I read more about this, I realized that their main intention was not actually to realistically go and intimidate India or stop that invasion. Their real intention was to court China. So when Henry Kissinger visited Pakistan, he ended some of his meetings there early in 1971 to then do an impromptu meeting, discussion, visit to China to essentially convince them to become more friendly with the US, which did eventually happen. So it's so crazy that in every small conflict as well, there's so many games that are happening simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah.
China at
Absolutely.
that time being a communist country, like they were very clearly a communist country at that time. It wasn't even like 50-50. In 1950s, their relationships with the USSR had been great. Uh, then in the 1960s, their relations take a dip. They even have some border clashes with the USSR. And suddenly, at the beginning of 1970, the US is like, well, this is our opportunity, right? Like, we can definitely have a much bigger presence. I'm sure in their mind, they were thinking of it as like a trade off. Like, instead of having just Pakistan, which is one staunch ally that they counted on at that point, which they later very clearly used in the Afghanistan conflict as well, as like a launching pad towards their activities in Afghanistan. Uh, they were courting this second one while using this conflict. So even though we read all the stuff that I had read about it, it was like the US was coming in to help Pakistan. But then when you look at it, they were also playing like this other game. They weren't really there to just help Pakistan or turn this big into a much bigger conflict. Which I think as soon as there is a tape from like the captain of the task force when they were coming in, they already realized that the Soviets were already there. So there was not much that they could do. I think he already communicated that it's too late. They're already there, and I think that was the subtle way that he had of telling his commanders back in the US that look, it's not going to happen. We have to drastically escalate to do anything really. And these stories, I'm very surprised that we don't know about. Like when I learned history,
Yeah.
we know nothing about these stories, right? Like this is not talked about in any textbook.
Our history ends at we got independence.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Like nothing after that. Like what?
It's so
So yeah,
interesting.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's very interesting. Like you was talking about, like their real intention was to quote China, and I think that is because China became their entire manufacturing hub, right?
Mm.
So this is also one thing where you're like, before, like we're always like, oh, they're so developed, they're so everything's so great, the air is so great, the pollution, there's no pollution and stuff like that. But why, when you think about why, it's because they have this other person doing all the dirty work for them, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so their whole plan was to China was a communist country, so it was easier than India in being a democracy and being like federal with so many states.
Mm.
It was actually easy for them to sort of have them as their manufacturing hub, basically, because it can be more easily controlled in a
Yeah.
communist environment, and then have India be like have Pakistan as the balancing thing for India, because so that India cannot grow as much, because India has great potential to grow, as we can see now.
Mm.
And so like just keep them under that whole, oh, non-violence, da, 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 and then kind of keep them engaged in everything else so that they don't grow or reach their potential, basically.
Yeah.
So it's funny because the US is like, oh, we are the flag bearers of freedom and democracy, but then even they know, like geopolitically, like it's there, the democracy is there in their country, but geopolitically it's always easier with a dictatorship and a communist
Yeah.
government to like control them,
And
basically.
you can see this so many times. The US always projects its values when they talk on the world stage, but then when it comes to their actions, they will always back dictators and like topple governments, topple democracies. The number of democracies that the US has tried to topple over the years and successfully toppled as well in some cases. Yeah, it's very. Anyway, I actually I started looking into this topic more when I read this book called December in Dhaka. Uh,
Okay.
Very nice book. It's about the 1971 conflict, and it takes a non-history person like me through the conflict very nicely, and I found it a very good book. One interesting thing that I read in that book, which was completely fascinating, is in all of these conflicts, we always see pictures of the conflict coming out, and I always thought, who in their right mind is going into this conflict and taking pictures and living in rubble, basically, because there's nothing there, right? But apparently not. Like in that conflict specifically, there was a very well-known like hotel where all the press and international delegates stayed, which was always known to be out of bounds to everyone, like the Indian side and Pakistani side. Like all the belligerents, as you might call it, in a conflict, knew that one, you don't. This is like neutral ground, and there is no business to be carried out on the. It's very like reminiscent of John Wick, where you have the big, and you don't carry out any business in the.
Yeah.
And towards the end of the conflict, East Pakistani officials, like the main commander who finally signed the surrender, uh, all tried to get entry into the hotel as like a final shelter, because they knew that the Indian army would not violate this, because that's where all the international press was staying. uh, and they were denied because they were like, as soon as we take you in, this becomes an active military zone, and we can't endanger all the other people. Like they were offering them like crazy amounts of money. But then we were like, we can't do this. Like this, the whole reason that we are in this position is because we are neutral. And it was so fascinating. I was like, oh my god, that such kind of cooperation can exist even in a conflict is amazing. It's great. I found that very like inspiring in a good way. I was like, yeah, this
Mhm.
is that the fact that this can happen is gives me hope that even in
Yeah,
dark times there is some semblance of humanity there. So
right. And I do find that a lot, right? I mean, it's very different on a country and a geopolitical level, but at a human level, right? And I think one of the good things, I mean, we can talk about how horrible social media is for your health and all of that. That's true. But then you have now a greater understanding. Like, I know that there are a lot of people who are trying to watch like more Indian stuff, and then you have like all of this like recognition of like this knowledge coming out which we didn't have before. Like we didn't learn this in history, but we know it because of podcasts, because of people coming in and researchers talking about it. And it's just now a lot more people, and it's not just Indians watching this or other people. It's like it's available for the entire world, so
yeah,
like yeah,
and it's so much more
that's
accessible, right? Like it's a lot easier to gain that knowledge if you have that curiosity. Like if I wanted to know about it, there is that material available. I can just go on YouTube and like search for videos, and I'm sure I'll find like a lot of them talking about this. Sure, I'll have to do a little bit more independent research to find out what the reality is, because sometimes the YouTube videos I've seen do tend to like dramatize it just to keep people hooked to the end. Um, but even so, like that 80% of information you can get very easily,
yeah.
just in like 1 hour of your time. That's awesome. I mean, we live in amazing.
Amazing times. And what I was trying to get at was like there are people of other countries trying to learn more about other countries.
Yeah,
Like we're not taught about like Japanese history. We're not taught about anything else.
yeah,
And so there is that sort of, and you can see this sort of like communities forming online, people talking about like say Harry Potter or something, but also like trying to learn about other cultures, other
yeah,
communities. And I feel like that, yeah, that gives me hope. Like I feel at the end of the day, people are people, and with like more people moving globally, more people moving like in other countries and living in other countries, like you do get that sense of like, oh, this is stuff here. I mean, like I don't know, I would be talking about Vasa, but I know about Vasa.
yeah.
Like how would I ever know if I hadn't gone? So it's just really nice to like get this sort of global perspective
Mhm.
on things. So
Yeah,
yeah, I wanted to talk about a reel I saw which was really funny.
yeah.
So this foreign girl came here for a solo trip to India,
Okay.
and I think she was American or European or something. I don't remember, but she was basically traveling to the airport at a really bad time in Mumbai in the rains.
Ooh.
So Mumbai floods like insanity. And literally the driver just, I mean, how we are with driving. He drove through the floods and made like
Oh no. Yeah,
the
with the water
airport
coming on all sides. Yeah.
with the water coming at all sides, and then the rickshaw driver just coming, and she was like, oh my god. But she was so supportive. She was like, Indians are heroes. Like this guy drove through the damn flood to get me to the airport at 2 a.m.
Nice.
And she was so supportive, and she was like, oh, I wish I can go to Mumbai again and stuff. So I think this is fun. Like even people being more like, I know it's crazy, and it was very easy for her to be like, oh, what is this? Why is this logged and stuff like that? But she was like, she took the positive side of it, and she was like,
Yeah,
oh my god, people are brave over here. Like people are so brave. And I'm glad that we have that culture of like people just doing whatever to like get you on time and everything. Like
absolutely.
that was a very wholesome thing to watch. It was funny, but it was wholesome as
That
well.
was awesome, yes. And you, because of like being able to go and visit, like she was there. She saw it firsthand,
Yeah.
which means she got a perspective that she would never have gotten by just like seeing the pictures If she would have seen the picture, she would have probably thought the same thing. Like, why is this street waterlogged? But then on the other side, she was like, there is this person who's willing to like go it just for me, which is
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you get that now because I've honestly seen different perspectives of conflicts which I have always known about. Just because I'm now in like a now that information is there, and having traveled, I have the urge to actually look at the different perspectives and the ability to look at the different perspectives. Like, it's great. I'm so happy that more people are into this now.
Yeah.
This is going to benefit the world and it will reduce conflicts in a big way, I feel. Hopefully. Think-
The conflicts are not in our hands. That is the problem. Because I do believe that even if you ask people, 90% of people don't want conflicts.
yeah.
But then, power and everything is a thing. And you were talking about the US. I had a thing to mention. Like, their thing with Russia. Like, now I know that China is a big player, and they're like, oh, Trump versus China, da, da, da. Like, that thing is going on. And but I did listen to a podcast once where there was a geopolitical expert, and he said, "Yeah, but they want you to think that China is an economic enemy, but they are not a military enemy for the US. So it's still Russia. It's still the US versus Russia because Russia has the most amount of nuclear warheads still."
Mm.
And so, because of that, like they will always tell you, "Oh, China is the enemy. China is the enemy. Look there." But actually, it's Russia again. Still, it's that Cold War thing where it's like U.S. versus Russia. That is the real thing because ultimately, what matters, even in the geopolitical sense, is all military might is the most at priority rather than economics. Even I mean, economics is very helpful and it's very important, but like nuclear warheads have been everything,
Yeah.
apparently. So, yeah.
Who has the biggest stake? It's always what it comes down to, right? Yeah.
And they need an enemy. Like a superpower always needs an enemy to blame things on. So, that is what they do with Russia, kind of.
Wow. Okay, this has been great. I think both stories were really good because I think we both knew enough about each other's stories that we were able to add to each other. I loved it. I think that was the best part. It
Hmm.
also helped keep the conversation going as well. Like, I think clearly, like I said, I was not prepared enough. My story kind of went four ways at once. But
No, but I think that's what happens in the podcast, right? It's a conversation, so it's fine. And yeah, it is like you were able to explain quite a bit, and also add to the specifics of my story because I did not remember all the different flaws and everything. So yeah, it definitely helped a lot.
yeah, this was great. I think this totally worked. Let's do this again. I think we can come up
Yes,
with new
definitely.
stories and
More prepared next
more
time.
prepared next time. Yes.
Do some homework for the podcast.
yes. Anyway, cool. Okay. Thank you for doing this. And thank you for people who choose to watch.
And thank you for inviting me. I had a lot of fun, and we should definitely do it again.
Done. Yes. Bye.
Bye.